Hubo un tiempo en que parecía que el liberalismo estaba dominando en el mundo, que todos los países del planeta íbamos a tener regímenes más democráticos, regímenes con mayores libertades. Sin embargo, las cosas no han funcionado así. En los últimos años hemos empezado a ver una serie de regímenes autoritarios que han surgido en distintas partes del mundo. Está el caso de Hugo Chávez y Nicolás Maduro en Venezuela. Está el caso de Víctor Orbán en Hungría, el de Erdogan en Turquía. Tenemos también a Estados Unidos, ahora bajo el régimen de Donald Trump, y México que ha venido acotando las libertades, las instituciones liberales que se construyeron a lo largo de 25 años. Quizás por eso, después de 35 años que se realizó el encuentro Vuelta, que analizó los cambios que estaban teniendo lugar en el mundo a fines de los 80, principios de los 90, hoy estamos viendo una nueva reunión de ese tipo en nuestro país. Es la libertad de vuelta y participan la revista Letras Libres, el departamento, bueno, el grupo Salinas a través de su sección de arte y cultura, y en donde distintos intelectuales del mundo que han discutido el tema de la política, de la democracia, del liberalismo, se han reunido en nuestro país. Yo quiero agradecer la presencia en este programa de Mark Lilla, politólogo, historiador de las ideas, profesor de humanidades en la Universidad de Columbia de Nueva York, autor de libros como Ignorance and Bliss, Ignorancia y Dicha, o El Regreso Liberal, The Once and Future Liberal, en fin, libros que han marcado de alguna manera el pensamiento sobre el liberalismo en distintos lugares del mundo. Vamos a estar hablando en inglés de manera que usted pueda escuchar directamente al profesor Lilla. Mark, thank you very much for being with us. First of all, how do you define liberal? You know, I see totally different descriptions of what a liberal is in Europe or in the United States. In the United States, when you talk about a liberal or a liberal position, what do you mean?
Well, as you noted, it depends where you go in the world to see how the word is used and what it means. Um, in the United States, liberal has come to mean basically social democratic
Mhm.
in terms of party politics and programs. Liberal in Europe and perhaps in Latin America, the first thought is economic liberalism or neoliberalism,
Right. Yeah.
free markets,
The Austrian school of thought, for
the
example.
Austrian school, exactly. But there is a deeper liberal core, I think, that's a kind of liberal constitutionalism that grew up in the 19th century. We owe the word liberal, in fact, to the Spanish language.
That's right.
And
Constitución de Cádiz,
yes,
Cádiz
and
Constitution, 1812.
that's right. And so that liberalism is really about constitutional self-government
Mhm.
with a protection of individual rights and a care for the basic social welfare of those in the country.
With the fall of the Berlin Wall and the dismemberment of the Soviet Union, it seemed for a while that authoritarian regimes were on the wane, that we were going to be able to live under some kind of a liberal democratic rule everywhere in the world. In fact, Francis Fukuyama claimed that this was the end of history as we'd known it. But we've seen actually a reemergence of authoritarian regimes in different parts of the world: Hungary, Egypt, the Arabian countries, in Latin America with Venezuela, but also in the United States and in Mexico. What's happened? What did we do something wrong?
Well, I think perhaps we have the glove inside out, as I might say, that we shouldn't assume that since 1989 or the early 90s, that something happened to human nature such that human beings were willing to take on the burdens of citizenship, to obey the boundaries of laws and constitutions. Liberal orders are very rare and very new things.
Mhm.
And for millennia, human beings have governed themselves differently mainly by individuals or by churches, but certainly not in a liberal way, which puts a burden of citizenship on the individual.
Is the return to authoritarianism back to the normal?
It is, in my view. When Fukuyama talked about the end of history,
Hmm.
what he meant was that not that things were over, but that a historical process that got us to a point where we could see what the best possible political regime was in the modern context. And that would be a liberal order with a capitalist economy controlled politically. But the fact that that is sort of where ideally we should be does not mean that that's where human beings are prepared to live. And when there are crises, when there is uncertainty, people want a sense of that someone's in control. And also that someone speaks for them. In Roman history, there was this office of the tribune of the plebs.
Hmm.
And this was an office that was installed late in Roman history. And their job essentially was simply to speak for the common people who had otherwise no representation. And the figures that we're seeing now remind me of these tribune figures who say that there's this whole machine out there that's operating. It's full of politicians and business people and so on, professors, journalists, but they're all members of the same class. They all get along together. They're ruling things for their interest. But I am taking care of you. And that's a very powerful message when people feel not only disempowered, but also feel that the world is illegible, that they can't make sense of what's going on.
What do you make of the rule of Donald Trump in the United States? I mean, he clearly generated tremendous enthusiasm on a part of the population that felt left behind in the United States. What do you think of the way he's ruled and the way he's used this popular support that he got in the latest election, in which he actually won the popular vote and he won of course, the electoral college vote?
Yeah, well, I think it's not always clear to people who live outside the United States, that we're in a phase and have been for quite some time of what's called negative voting, which means that people are voting against another party rather than voting for one and for particular figures. And the thing to be explained for me is how it was that the Democratic Party ceased to represent ordinary workers and families who had been affected by globalization, areas of the country where small towns had collapsed, where education was in bad shape, and so on. And that party ceased to speak to people in that middle. They didn't feel recognized, and they didn't recognize themselves in the Democratic Party. Where in Trump, strangely, ordinary people saw themselves. Now that sounds odd because he's a multimillionaire, he's extravagant and so on, but someone once described him as a poor man's idea of a rich man.
Okay.
That somehow he seemed like someone who respected ordinary people. He ate like them, he talked like them, he carried himself like them. And if the ordinary people, had money, they would build houses and buildings just like him. And so there was a bond there.
Now, we've seen at the same time a turning to the left of the Democratic Party. We've seen the victory in New York City of Zoran Mamdani. And we also have figures in the Democratic Party like Senator Bernie Sanders, like Alexander Ocasio. Is the Democratic Party becoming a socialist party, as Mamdani is or claims to be?
No, I mean, certainly there's a resurgent left, and there there's something new also because their power comes from what they do online.
Mhm.
And so it's difficult to know how much resonance there will be for their message among people who don't live in a little sort of media and online bubble. I find it hard to imagine that Mamdani and Octavio Cortez could be popular in middle American states.
Mhm.
So I don't think it's moving left in that way. There is a more active left now, and they're also younger, and the Democratic Party is geriatric at this point.
Mhm.
And they don't have a sense of a common program. And what the Republicans have is a sense of a mission. Even though they're in control of the government, they have this sense of insurgency, that they are fighting the elites in the country. And that's their narrative. And Democrats have nothing like that.
Mhm. Now, are we seeing, we're seeing, of course, polarization of political life in the US. We're also seeing the same thing in Mexico and maybe in Europe as well. Uh, is this the way it's going to be? Or the voters going to go to the extremes, to the extreme right and to the extreme left?
I'm very pessimistic, and it's not so much for political reasons as for economic and educational reasons. As we become more and more a technological society, participating in the economic power structure or the political power structure requires a university education.
Mhm.
And the more the computers and things like that matter, the more technical training will matter. This has led to a splitting of castes of people in all of our countries, because there's no real ladder to climb from the working classes up if it requires one thing that happens when you're an adolescent, and that is to go to university. And so the split between the university class and the non-university class is large, growing, and will be permanent, in my view. And that means there is going to be a population that will respond to leaders like Trump.
How have the social networks and the internet changed the way we interact with each other, the way we do politics?
Well, mainly it leads to the conversation of the lowest common denominator, obviously. It excites people's passions. It also weirdly, I think, gives people a sense of control. That is, that they can choose their sources of information and rumors and all the rest. And so they can silo themselves and find someone whom they trust.
Although we see that in the media as well. The people who follow CNN have nothing to do with people who follow Fox News.
That's right. That's right. But now you have all these little niches that you can go to. And so strangely, this is one of the difficult things to explain to myself as well. While a large section of the American population distrusted the doctors who were telling them what to do during COVID, they would find some nutty figure on the internet who had no medical training, whom they would believe. Now, why? I think part of it is they feel an association with that person person cares about them and respects them. So the psychological effects of this are really complex.
Ignorance is bliss.
Well, for a lot of people, ignorance is bliss. With all this information coming at you constantly, there is this desire, I think, just to pull the curtain shut and to keep all that out and just talk to one person whom you trust. And so deliberation becomes very difficult in this situation.
Mark Lilla, thank you very much for speaking with us en la entrevista.
I've enjoyed it. Thank you.
And a usted que al vernos y escucharnos hace posible este programa, se lo agradezco también. Esto es todo por hoy, pero no se le olvide. Nos vemos la próxima.